it just kind of got me out of such a sort of a hole after my masters had finished, and it was COVID and I didn't know what I was going to do, and it's just feel like it's opened up so many doors, and it's just made the world seem like such a small place. Like I was kind of, this morning I talked to someone in Istanbul, talked to somebody else in Hanoi, and then after this podcast I'm talking to a student in Tokyo. So yeah, it's awesome. It just feels like I've got these friends kind of in on the other side of the world, but it feels like they're not far away at all.
You're listening to I Taught English Abroad, a podcast by TEFL.org. My name is Ewan Davidson, and in this podcast series, we're going to be talking to people who've taught English as a foreign language, find out where it's taken them, and find out what they've learned from it. So whether you're an aspiring TEFL teacher, you're studying a TEFL course, or you're interested in teaching English more generally, hopefully this is a podcast for you. We'll be covering a range of topics each week, from travel and accommodation to the nitty-gritty of teaching, all while taking a look at global teaching and the quirks of TEFL life. I'm excited to say today I'm joined by Claire Mitchell. Claire lives in Manchester in the UK and has been tutoring online since 2020. She specialises in teaching in the writing and speaking sections of the IELTS exam, we'll get onto that, and has her own YouTube channel focused exactly on this. She currently teaches on Cambly and loves chatting to her wonderful students around the world, her words. In addition to the TEFL qualifications that Claire gained from the TEFL.org, very good choice, by the way, she has a bachelor's degree in English literature and a master's degree in creative writing, so you can count me jealous for that. She's also taught ESOL on a voluntary basis for a charity that helps refugees improve their English. So I couldn't ask for a better guest. Claire, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Okay, I can't complain. Who would listen?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
At least the heat wave's over.
Well, that's true, yeah. It's been stormy in Glasgow for the last couple of days. I think it's sort of sorting itself out now, but yeah, it's been a bit funny.
Yeah.
So it's, as I said in the intro, you started doing this in 2020, so it's been a bit of a whirlwind couple of years for you. If you don't mind me asking, what were you doing before you discovered TEFL?
Yeah, so before I was actually spent quite a few years working in just corporate offices doing sort of legal administration and kind of contracts admin and working in legal departments and that kind of thing. So it was all fairly typical kind of office work. And then I left in order to do my master's in creative writing. It was just something I'd always wanted to do. And I kind of reached that point where I was like, it's kind of now or never. And then after that, immediately after graduating, pretty much 2 months later, COVID struck. So then I was like, oh, okay, because I'd been planning to just kind of perhaps go back into admin work, back into office work. And so that was kind of turned upside down a little bit. And one of my brother-in-laws, actually, who's a teacher in a kind of brick and mortar school, he suggested TEFL, and it was something that I hadn't really thought about before, but because I've kind of love English I've always loved writing and kind of language, so I thought I'd give it a go, and did a bit of research, and obviously came across the TEFL.org and kind of saw all the accreditations and things, and so I opted to do my training with the TEFL.org and did the 120 hours course first, and then did the kind of advanced online course as well, which I found really, really helpful, especially for helping me feel a bit more confident, kind of delivering a lesson actually online. So it was kind of a big shift, and so I've been just working from home, working remotely throughout the pandemic, and kind of continuing now as well, just because I'm enjoying it. So
Absolutely. And with your career experience and the degrees that you've done, I'm sure you would have had lots of different kind of career options, especially in the context of pandemic and working remotely. But I just wanted to ask, what was it about teaching English specifically that inspired you to make that career move? Was it based on kind of the strength of your academic experience, or was there something particular about it where you thought, yeah, this is for me?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It kind of just piqued my interest, probably initially because I've kind of just always loved English. It was the subject. I mean, and I guess more the literature side of it. Really, it was what I studied at uni and my A levels. I did kind of English literature and English language as separate A levels, which at the time, my teachers were all a bit disapproving of. They were like, "Oh no, you're like, it's too narrow a focus. You need to kind of spread your wings a bit more first." But it was just always something I loved. So I think the English aspect appealed first, and then I also loved the thought of being able to, because I'd spent 2 years, my master's was kind of distance learning, so I'd got used to not having to go into an office every day, and really loved that, kind of like really enjoyed working from home. So I thought, now that everything was going online, the kind of secondary reason was that it was something that I thought, I can do this from home. I can do it from anywhere. If I want to kind of travel around, wherever kind of life takes me in the future, once the pandemic was over, then it was something that was just really flexible. So yeah, I think kind of the English first, and then after that, the fact that it was so flexible and I could do it remotely and work from home or wherever I kind of wanted to.
That makes total sense. And so there was something specific as well I wanted to ask you quite early on, because we mentioned there at the start the IELTS exam. Try saying that quickly 5 times. So
Yeah.
for those that are watching this and don't really know what that is, to the best of my knowledge, it's an exam. It's a way for students across the world to find opportunity in English-speaking countries, primarily, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've written a couple of articles for the TEFL.org website, but it's hard to even put across in writing like how meaningful it is. So for listeners and for viewers that aren't fully aware, what can passing the IELTS do for people?
Yeah, so you can just call it IELTS, actually. So that's the kind of easier. So that's the easier option. So it's sort of the International English Language Testing System, which is also a mouthful. But yes, it's kind of so my students that are studying it, it's so kind of important to them, so essential to their futures. It's you can either take it if you want to kind of emigrate to an English speaking country and kind of work there, or you can take it if you want to study abroad. So if you want to kind of do a master's, or I think probably also for undergraduate degrees in an English speaking country. And a lot of my students are, they're really kind of passionate about wanting to travel, and they take their kind of academic work really seriously. So it's just something that it's kind of really sort of vital to their lives. And so I feel like helping them practice and kind of achieve, I suppose, one of their goals, hopefully, it's just really quite rewarding and fulfilling, because it is such a kind of such an objective for them, and it's so difficult and challenging. I think they get very stressed about it, so it's kind of trying to sort of help them through that a little bit as well. I sometimes find myself giving kind of a bit of kind of life advice as well, and just sort of all round helping them to kind of prepare for the test day, and give them some like relaxation tips and ways that they can feel a bit more comfortable about the whole process.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that makes total sense. And it strikes me, I mean, obviously I'm not a teacher, that should be obvious, but it strikes me as something that's a bit more kind of, obviously, teaching English in general to as a foreign language opens up all these opportunities for people, whether it's getting through school or university, that kind of thing. But I've got to imagine there's quite an emotional kind of component to teaching something like that, because it is so kind of integral. And if someone has plans to move to an English speaking country, or to kind of unlock something academically somewhere else, or we'll get on to refugees and that kind of thing later on as well, which obviously plays a large component in your career. But as you say, I can imagine there's a sort of, it's not just about the teaching, it's about you kind of being there for students as well. Can it be challenging sort of, I guess, like emotionally? Can it, do you find, like, obviously as rewarding as it is, for teachers who want to teach the IELTS, which thank you again for clarifying, do teachers need to be prepared that there's a little bit more to it? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I would say so, because it is so kind of, yeah, because it is so important to their lives. So so I think, which I probably didn't realize when I got into it, I just thought, there seems to be a lot of demand for this, so it will be a good thing to kind of specialize in. And I'd had some inquiries about helping people with the writing aspect of it. I think because of some of my writing background. So I thought, this actually makes sense. It kind of led me towards it. And then once I started teaching it, I realized how how crucial an exam it was to these students, and they're a lot of them are at that age in their life, so they're kind of perhaps late teens or early 20s, and they feel like their future's ahead of them. So it's that point where things become really critical. So yeah, I think you have to be quite understanding and just anticipate that that they might have kind of bad days and good days with their studies. And some of my students, sometimes they feel like they reach a plateau, or they have a kind of a week where they're feeling really frustrated, or perhaps they're like comparing themselves to other kind of students that they've come across, and worry that they're not good enough. So it's important to be able to give them some positivity and kind of let them know that there's always peaks and troughs in in learning anything new. But as long as you're always practicing, then you're always kind of going in the right direction. You're sort of moving towards where you want to get to, and you just have to expect there might be little blips along the way, but that's completely normal. So yeah, kind of I try and when they're having a bad day, sort of tell them that as well.
That's really interesting. And obviously, IELTS has become a part of your career in the sense that you're on YouTube as well. And so kind of talk me through that, because I just, first of all, I absolutely love the kind of ambition and confidence of it being like, I've changed careers and now I'm at a point where I've learned kind of so much that I can impart, lessons on YouTube, that kind of thing. First of all, I love that. But secondly, how did you kind of come to that? Did you notice there was a bit of a gap in the market in a sense? And how has that impacted how you teach?
So I guess in terms of IELTS, there's lots of sort of help and things out there, and a few kind of YouTube channels. But actually, I have to credit one of my students with this, because he also teaches English in Vietnam.
Wow.
And yeah, he's like a really very advanced kind of proficient speaker. But I've just been helping him kind of fine tune a few sort of a few areas of his English in terms of really getting that native proficiency. And he teaches IELTS in Vietnam. And he said, look, there's not many videos out there where you get native speakers doing example speaking answers. There's kind of there's some writing help and some speaking help, but what I try to do with mine is kind of simulate a bit of an exam environment where you're not scripting the answers. So you'll find a lot of maybe scripted answers out there, but what I'll do is I'll just take a question and kind of answer it like I would in the exam. So there's some natural fillers, and I'm guilty of using words like or or I mean, or umming and erring and things, but they're just kind of natural parts of English, so you can't sort of block them out completely. So I just try to give really authentic, sort of unscripted responses, and include some topic-specific vocabulary, because that's a really important kind of thing to be aware of in IELTS. The examiner looks for kind of precision in your language, and if you can use some sort of everyday colloquial kind of idiomatic language as well, not too much. And sometimes they'll try and use too many cliches, so I try and do example answers that use more natural, relaxed, sort of informal English, rather than sort of crowbarring in lots of things like it's not my cup of tea, or it's raining cats and dogs, because we don't really go around talking like that all the time. So yeah, that was just the like I say, my my sort of Vietnamese teacher friend suggested it and said, there's not a lot out there of just these natural native IELTS example answers. So that was where it kind of started. And I just sort of hopefully branch out and do a few more types of videos at some point. But hopefully they've been helpful for people kind of to pick up some useful vocabulary and phrases and things.
We should at this point give your YouTube channel a quick plug. So if people are listening to this or watching this, how do they find you on YouTube?
Good question. Yeah, I'm not really used to plugging anything, but I'm just on just Claire Mitchell. I'm trying to think the best way for them to find me, to be honest, because I'm just on with my name, Claire Mitchell. Perhaps if people searched for sort of IELTS, or I use hashtags actually, so I kind of put hashtag native English, hashtag native speaker, hashtag IELTS speaking part 2. If you kind of searched with that in particular, then and perhaps include my name as well, then it might pop up. Yeah.
Cool. We will, of course, drop a link in the description for both the podcast and the video as well. But so you talked about idioms and cliches and that kind of thing. If I was going to ask you what the biggest challenge is for non-native level English speakers with spoken English, would that rank pretty highly? And what other challenges are there that maybe we don't think of as native English speakers that seem utterly bizarre to people who are learning the language?
Yeah, so a lot of I say one of the things that my students kind of struggle with, or that they feel that they're not very good at, even the really, the kind of students that really impress me with their English ability, that can just hold a half-hour conversation with me, but that they always kind of complain that they can never remember the words that they want. They seem to struggle specifically with vocabulary,
Right.
And especially if they're talking about more abstract concepts, so the sort of vocabulary that you wouldn't use every day. And with IELTS in particular, you're examined on kind of all kinds of different topics, and including, kind of random ones. They expect you to maybe talk about art and the environment, even really kind of strange things like whether you've ever, like some of the recent questions have been, have you ever bought a mirror, and you have to talk about mirrors, or have you given a wallet as a gift, kind of really sort of random questions.
So strange.
Yeah, really odd. So and then the part 3 aspect is where you get more of the sort of abstract philosophical questions about, how maybe life has changed from the past to the present, or they might talk about, want to know differences between like the old and the young, and where people like to live, and are they in the city or the countryside, and why. So it's just not things that you talk about in everyday conversation. I generally try and give them tips in terms of learning vocabulary, and for a start I'll say, look, just use the most kind of appropriate word. So even if it's not a really sophisticated advanced word, it doesn't matter. It's better to use the right word for the job and sound native and natural, rather than trying to force a kind of a more complex word that perhaps doesn't really fit in the context, and kind of just give them tips like, I sometimes tell them just to, but when they're sort of going about their daily life, for example, kind of tell themselves in their head what they're doing in English. So even if they're, I'm making a cup of tea now, I'm walking down the street, the birds are singing, anything like that. If they haven't got anyone to practice with, they can kind of just do that by themselves and sort of get into that headspace of speaking English. And I think, other than that, sort of, I tell them to put vocabulary on Post-it notes and stick it around the house. And then when they come across one, sort of use it in a sentence, use it in context. And also just with IELTS particularly, take the different topics and perhaps focus on one topic at a time, and just learning maybe or practicing kind of 5 new words a week, or 10 new words a week, whatever feels kind of manageable and achievable, not to give themselves too many new words. And when they learn a new one, learn some synonyms as well. So some other words that mean the same thing, or some antonyms, words that mean the opposite. So you've got kind of a group. So I think, there's ways they can help build up their vocabulary, but I think it's just letting them know as well that native speakers always forget words and can't find the words that they want. So they feel like it's a really kind of bad thing. But I say, look, the amount of time I'm sitting there and a word's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't kind of pluck it out of my subconscious. So, it's natural and not something to feel ashamed of. But yes, I say that's probably one of their struggles. They feel like they can't access the vocabulary that they want.
I'm not even sure I would pass the IELTS, to be honest. That sounds...
It's really tough.
Yeah.
It is tough. Yeah, it's difficult. It's I'm actually going to so I've kind of done a practice kind of a mock IELTS exam, but I'm actually going to sit the exam myself in a couple of months just to experience it. So I'm sitting it in Manchester, and yes, I'm, like I say, it's really hard. I mean, even native speakers, you would need to study it and kind of understand the techniques that they're looking for, because I think otherwise the kind of top kind of band score you can get is a 9, but I think it can be common for native speakers to kind of get a sort of a 6 or a 7 just because they've not necessarily practiced, and they're not giving the examiner what he wants, which is as a range of vocabulary and kind of structured answers and things like that. It's difficult.
That's absolutely fascinating. So to kind of change gears a wee bit, we're going to take a break shortly, but just before we do that, I want to ask you, working for an online business, it means you can essentially teach English abroad in different parts of the globe during a working day. So, you might be sitting in Manchester, but theoretically you're teaching across the world. Where are a lot of your students from at the moment, and what are the major differences? What major differences are there learning English for speakers of different languages? So, for example, what might someone whose mother tongue is Italian struggle with compared to someone who speaks, for example, like an East Asian language? Like, what are the kind of differences there? Or is it all broadly kind of the same challenge?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I would say most of my students are, they're kind of all around the world, but mostly kind of Asian countries. I've got quite a few in so Vietnam and Japan and China, Korea, and then also I have some I've got a lady in Canada and California. And actually, they're both Korean, but they're living in Canada and America. And I think in terms of the sort of the difficulties, certainly in terms of accent, I think, for example, probably quite a few of my students are Vietnamese, and I know that in their sort of native tongue there's a tendency to not pronounce the endings of words very strongly, so that's something they really have to practice when they learn English, like especially with things, if they're using the past tense, they won't necessarily pronounce the sort of ED very strongly, or they might miss off or not pronounce the S at the end of plurals strongly enough, and that kind of thing would be marked down in IELTS, if you can't hear that, because the examiner might assume they're using sort of a singular instead of a plural, or present tense instead of past tense. So so for them in particular, I think kind of my students in Southeast Asia and around there, I'm always kind of trying to listen for the pronunciation of the endings of words, and that's probably one of the most noticeable, I think, challenges that I've come across.
Excellent. Okay, we're just going to take a quick break. One of my beautiful colleagues is going to tell us all about something that's happening on the TEFL.org website, and then we'll be right back with Claire Mitchell.
Hi there. We hope you're enjoying listening to I Taught English Abroad, a podcast by the TEFL.org. Hopefully you're feeling inspired by what you're hearing, and maybe you're wondering if you can teach English as a foreign language too. Well, the answer is yes. And as an exclusive reward for listening to this podcast, we're offering you 50% off TEFL courses, plus a free lesson plans pack to help you get started. Just use the code PODCAST at checkout. With that discount, you can get TEFL qualified with the world's most accredited TEFL course provider and learn how to teach from teachers. With dedicated tutor support, lifetime access to our TEFL Job Centre, and friendly advice from our team of experts, you could be teaching English abroad or online within just a few months. Signing up couldn't be simpler. Just visit www.tefl.org and add the code podcast at checkout to get your discount. That's www.tefl.org. Start your TEFL adventure today.
So one thing I really wanted to ask about that we covered in the intro is your work volunteering with refugees. I was just wondering, I don't know if everyone necessarily thinks of that. How difficult is it for people to find opportunities volunteering locally for refugees?
Yeah, so for that, that's also actually something that I'm doing online. And it's there are sort of a couple of refugee charities that I'm aware of. One is called RefuNet, and that's the one that I've volunteered for. And then the other is Language Linkers, and I think they've both got kind of Facebook pages and things like that. So that was not too difficult actually in terms of getting involved, because I think they were obviously always wanting volunteers, and there's so many kind of people out there sort of seeking asylum or refugees who really need some help. So yeah, they're all, these charities are always looking for people with different skills and abilities, that they can then match up to kind of a student. So yeah, it wasn't too tricky for me. It was, I think I just I kind of went on the Facebook page and sort of messaged the organisation, and I think perhaps had to fill out a form, kind of an application form, and told them what my I guess my training was and my skills, and kind of mentioned about English. So the first refugee that I was matched with wanted help with her GCSE English language actually, so it wasn't so much TEFL, it was kind of GCSE English, so that was good, really good to have to kind of go back in my brain and sort of access some GCSE stuff. Absolutely. Back from in the distant past.
Not that distant, I'm sure.
No, further away than I care to mention, but yeah, and then after we'd studied the GCSE, we then moved on and did some TEFL and kind of grammar and general English and some functional skills and just conversation practice. So that was all really great kind of practice for me, as well as hopefully, being beneficial and helping her. And she's actually, so we've taken a break from our lessons now because she got her English GCSE, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's really good.
So that was awesome, and so now she's doing A-levels, kind of ultimately wants to become a doctor, and I think she's got so many kind of obstacles against her, just on a number of different levels, but she's just so kind of ambitious and committed, and it really, I find it really quite inspirational. She kind of just keeps going. She's very focused, so I just keep in touch with her now and kind of touch base and check how she's doing.
That's fantastic. And obviously with the humanitarian crises we've seen in recent years, refugees coming from Syria, Palestine, Yemen, and of course more recently the invasion of Ukraine. It sounds kind of obvious, but has the demand for English teachers, TEFL teachers, I'm going to guess that's increased pretty exponentially.
Yeah, so I think so I'm on a kind of email forum group thing for kind of ESOL volunteers and specifically for refugees, and I've seen lots of emails lately, related to that, and people have been creating resources, like helpful resources, and attaching links to those resources for volunteer teachers to use with Ukrainian refugees, and so I think, yeah, the demand has definitely gone up. I think it's definitely there. Mm-hmm. And I think, kind of the charities are just, and I guess, I think there's probably local opportunities as well. You could do kind of in-person teaching as well. That's not something I've sort of explored yet, unfortunately, but it's definitely something I would think about. Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic, and there's so much value in doing that. And I'd encourage anyone that's listening or watching this to check out opportunities locally. obviously you're now a really established TEFL, SL teacher, and as we mentioned, you're even doing lessons on YouTube. But for someone who's building their CV in terms of TEFL teaching and from a sort of utilitarian kind of voluntary perspective, how, I mean, obviously you would recommend it, but to what degree would you recommend voluntary work in terms of both, building a CV and doing something good in terms of a local, in a local way?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly recommend it. Yeah, I actually recommended it to a friend of mine who she lives down in Cornwall actually, but she also did her training with the TEFL org, and she kind of wanted to get started, so I mentioned RefuNet, which was the charity that I'm volunteering with, and she kind of contacted them, and she was put in touch with a student, and she's helped them, I think, for about six months or so, I think. And really found it, a great way to, just to kind of get started. And it gets you used to lesson planning, and because it's one-to-one, it's really nice. You can kind of really tailor your lessons specifically to the student. And I think, it just helps build up your confidence, as well as knowing that you're helping someone else. It kind of, you feel like you're putting what you've learned to good use in an extra way. So I would definitely advise it.
Excellent. So to switch gears a wee bit, what you've been able to do in 2 years is just absolutely astounding. And obviously you've got that really impressive academic history as well, including a master's in creative writing. So firstly, I'm jealous. And secondly, how creative can you be with different groups of students? Have you ever had students come up with their own stories? Can you sort of add a creative writing element to lesson planning? Like, how have you been able to use that?
Yeah, definitely. So I have actually got one student on Cambly who is a children's kind of illustrator, and she wants to write a children's book.
Okay.
So I've helped her a little bit with her story. She sent me some excerpts from it, and I've kind of corrected the English, and then I've also been able to kind of give her a few tips as to how to structure the story and kind of make the reader feel really absorbed in it, or want to know what's going to happen next. So I've definitely been able to use a creative aspect there. And I had another student as well who just wanted to practice writing generally, and he was an IELTS student, but he wanted to kind of, he was really advanced, so he wanted to sort of kind of write in a more advanced way, or kind of do something a bit more sophisticated. So I gave him some writing prompts, and I think he quite enjoyed, instead of writing sort of the typical academic essays, just being able to be a bit get a bit more creative. And I always try to emphasize that, I suppose, with English you can be a little bit, especially with writing, kind of adventurous or experimental, because some of them are really quite bogged down in the grammar and wanted to make sure that that's all correct. And of course you have to do that, or you have to kind of know the rules in order to break the rules. But if they want to just write a bit more creatively, instead of sticking to these kind of stricter, sort of rigid frameworks that IELTS demands, then it's just kind of maybe can bring a bit more fun and lightheartedness and pleasure and enjoyment into into kind of, I suppose, using the language. If you can do kind of write something more creative, I think it's just a little bit more fun.
That's really interesting, because I mean, kind of going off my own experiences here, in terms of English, we were always really encouraged to do creative writing, and there was always a creative writing element to whether we were graded on, even from primary school up the way. Excuse me. But in terms of learning foreign languages, like, not that I can speak them now, but I learned German and French, and there wasn't really that creative aspect of it. And I think that really would have helped, because if it's kind of self-directed in terms of the message that a student kind of wants to get across, surely these kind of phrases and words and terminologies are going to stick more inherently, because they've chosen to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So instead of kind of just using it in a really formal or academic way, to be able to use the language more creatively, and obviously in real life, whether you're just writing emails to an English friend, or kind of you're going to have to use language in quite a creative way, and just in everyday conversation, we don't always stick to the correct grammar. Depending where you come from, for example, in the UK. You kind of mix things up and probably mix tenses up and use things in a way that a student would maybe find odd. But I think that's kind of real English, in a real world context. So having that kind of creative element helps maybe broaden the horizons of the language student a little bit, so they know that they can use English a bit more flexibly if they want to.
I love that. So this section is, ostensibly it's a quick fire question thing, but I'm never ever going to tell a guest that they have to answer it really, really quickly, especially if the answer is really good. So, because I received some feedback on that after the first recording. So it's quick fire if you want it to be. If not, that's also fine. So
okay, I'll try and be concise, because I always feel like I'm not always concise enough. So I'm going to try to be.
Don't worry about it. Be as long as you need, honestly. It's going to be quick fire in the sense that I wrote these questions quickly. I don't know. So we'll get into a hypothetical, because everyone likes a hypothetical. So let's say money, visas, all the rest of the stuff, no object. You can be transported into any country in the world. Where would you want to teach the most?
Ooh. I think at the moment probably Vietnam, because, like I say, I've got students there, and I've watched loads of YouTube videos about it, and it looks amazing. And I think like the cost of living is, it's not too high. So I think, and there's just loads of beautiful scenery. So I think that would be my top choice for the moment.
Excellent. You can actually read a guide to teaching in Vietnam on a TEFL.org website. So
I've seen it. I have seen it. Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. That's the first successful plug I've ever done on this podcast. That's good. What do you wish someone had told you when you first got into TEFL?
Ooh. Oh my gosh! Look at this. See, this is just not quick at all. Probably. Do you know what? Maybe actually, just because I felt that it was such an unknown quantity to me. But if they'd told me about the amazing kind of students that I would be able to meet, some of them I really think of much more as friends now than students. So I think if I'd known that would have probably, inspired me to get stuck into it sooner. I would have felt really kind of excited about it from the get-go. It was kind of a bit more of a slower process of like, I'm enjoying this is great. If I'd known that, I think if someone said, the opportunity to meet some amazing kind of people around the world, that would have been good to know.
I love that. That's a great answer. What's the best, talking of advice, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given? It doesn't have to be TEFL related at all.
Oh, the best piece of advice I've ever been given. I mean, honestly, and like, I'm not just saying this, but yeah, probably my brother-in-law saying, "Oh, have you ever thought of TEFL?" Just because it just kind of got me out of such a sort of a hole after my masters had finished, and it was COVID, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And it's just feel like it's opened up so many doors, and it's just made the world seem like such a small place. Like I was kind of, this morning I talked to someone in Istanbul, talked to somebody else, in Hanoi, and then after this podcast I'm talking to a student in Tokyo. So it's awesome. It just feels like I've got these friends kind of in on the other side of the world, but it feels like they're not far away at all.
That's so cool. I mean, it's got to make the world feel like small, but in a good way, right? Like that's
yeah, it does, and it's kind of inspired me. It's made me want to travel a bit more and just see more of the world.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really good.
I love that. And if someone is considering doing a TEFL course, but they're nervous about it or they don't think they could do it, what would you tell them?
I would say, I'm like a massive worrier and kind of get anxious about everything. So I would say, like, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And yeah, also I would say, you can kind of take your time with it. So I found it great, the one I did with the TEFL, just because it was kind of, you can do it at your own pace. It's step by step. You kind of do the grammar, and then you've got like the additional modules, kind of the teaching young learners and things. So so I think you can pace yourself, so there's no pressure, and it's great fun. Like I say, if I can do it, and I kind of worry about everything, then anyone can do it.
Cool. Okay, finally, absolutely not TEFL related at all. Obviously, if you come in from Manchester, a couple of Manchester related questions, if you'll indulge me for a second. City or United?
Oh, I would have to say, officially, I'm a neutral.
Mhm.
This is complicated. My best friend is like United all day long. But my family, my dad, they're actually all not City, they're Liverpool.
Ooh, okay.
So, yeah, and that's a whole nother rivalry. So, yeah, so officially I'm neutral, but I'd have to say United because my friend would never forgive me otherwise.
That's a perfect diplomatic answer, that. Stone Roses or Happy Mondays?
Ooh, Stone Roses.
Okay. And Joy Division or New Order?
Ooh. Joy Division.
Excellent. I mean, that's the correct answer, but yeah. Okay. Claire, it's been an absolute blast talking to you. I've really, really enjoyed this. So finally, again, we'll plug your stuff. Where can people find you?
So I've got a Facebook page. Again, that's just sort of Claire Mitchell or Teacher Claire EM. And then YouTube, and yes, you could probably find me, Claire Mitchell, hashtag IELTS Speaking Part 2. That's probably a good way to find me. I'm sure there's a more high-tech answer for that, but I haven't quite got to grips with all the marketing side of that yet.
That'll come, I'm sure. I mean, never have we. So, no, we have the marketing department at TEFL works. Excellent. And I should clarify that. Claire, it's been fantastic speaking to you. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. It was great. Thank you very much for having me.
Not at all.
It was brilliant.